Hi, thanks for watching. This is Stephen Less from Sizzle Post, and I'm going to show you how I handle power windows for 360-degree spherical videos in Resolve. And here is a stitched 360-degree spherical video. When the viewer with the head-mounted display is looking straight ahead, he sees an empty road. If he turns around and looks back, he sees these cars approaching, the sides being behind the viewer and the center being in front of the viewer. And it's very important that this edge, when it meets up with this edge behind the viewer, is exactly the same. And that can be a problem with power windows of two types that I'll talk about. Now, the type of power window that it's not a problem with, and I'll hit Option B to add one. Of course, on your first node, you can do a first pass primary grade. On the second node here, which has a power window, we can do a rough outline of this little hill. And there's no problem with the fact that this is a 360-degree spherical video because the window doesn't cross the left or the right side of the frame, or the right or the left, whichever one you prefer. However, and I'll add another power window node, Option B. If I'm going to zoom back on this, let's say you wanted to treat the sky. Well, what I'm going to do is make 3 close control points, and then do the same over here. And that's so I can reference that middle point and I know which point is my reference. This isn't exactly on the line. Okay, yeah, there. All right. Now, I have no way of knowing that this point and this point are at the same height at this point, because there's no visual reference. Now, if I wanted to put a point here, that would match this point here, and I wouldn't have any problem. And so I don't need to make a video about that because that one's easy. So what I'm going to do is go to the gallery. Well, I already did before. And play a still. And then make it horizontal. And invert it because it's going the wrong way. Okay. Now, I can decide where I want this window to be on the seam when someone's watching with a head-mounted display. So I'll drag this up to here and say that's where I want it to be. Then I'll call back the power window and simply move, if I can grab the right one, the control point so that it lines up exactly with the wipe. And now the wipe has done its thing, played its part, and I will get rid of it. And I can grade this knowing that this point and this point are at the same height, which is really important, because if this one was higher or lower, when the viewer turned around and looked back at these cars, he would see a seam. He would see a hard line, which is not acceptable. And that's the end of that. Now I'm going to add option B, another power window. And actually this isn't a perfect example, but I'll be able to illustrate what I mean, I think. Let's say we have a hillside over here, and what I'm going to do again is make 3 close together, and that way 3 control points. That way I always know which one I'm referencing for the place where it crosses the line. And right now I'm only worried about this hillside, even though I'm crossing the right edge of the frame as it's seen in Resolve, and I'm going to have to continue it over here later. I can always add control points when I need them. So what I'm going to do now is pan it over. If I can find the correct knob. And now you see how here the control points are crossing at a certain point here. And I'm going to pan it over, and you could pan it over using this slider right here, but it's easier with the wave control panel. And now line up the same control points with the edge of the frame on the left. So now I know that where the edge of the screen is crossed and where the seam will be behind the viewer is the same. Excuse me, the same on both the left and the right as it's viewed here. So now I can just add whatever I want here to cover the area that is in play over here. Okay, so let's say that's what I want to cover. Now what I can do is do the grade I need, and I think it needs to be pink. Yes, let's make it really pink. Okay, so now this grade we can assume is going to work here, and it's also going to work on this side, because what we're grading or correcting is the same stuff, some vegetation or piece of the road or whatever it might be. So now I'm going to add just a plain old corrector, option S, and copy the grade from corrector 4 here, Command C, to corrector 5. There. So now if I disable with Command D corrector 4, I'm still looking at the same thing because I just copied it. Now what I'll do is the reverse and pan this over to the other side. And line up my chosen control points, although they don't line up. Why don't they line up? I must have moved one. Yes. Okay, that's all right. I'll line it up. There we go. Okay. Now, when I bring it over to the right, and I'll enable the corrector 4. When I bring it over to the right, I have the same correction as on the left, which is very important. Otherwise, there'll be a seam behind the viewer when he turns around and he looks behind himself at these cars approaching. If this side is different than this side, there'll be a seam. And if this height and this height are different, or this height and this height are different, there'll be a seam where the difference is. Now, let me just add a node as a way of getting rid of these the outline, and that's what you have. And that's really it, except if you want to make a correction, you really have to, a correction to the correction, you really have to do the same process again. So I'll just show you that. So I'll get rid of this node, and let's say this should be blue. It doesn't matter what side I work on here. In fact, I can get rid of the one I'm not going to work on. Okay. So this needs to be blue, says the client. Very blue. If it's not blue, the audience will have a reaction opposite to that called for by the director. Okay. Now I've made that correction over here, and I'll just repeat the process. I'll make another plain old serial node. I'll Command C copy. I'll Command V paste, and then I'll pan this over. I hope I didn't move those control points. How come? Why does that keep happening? It doesn't really matter as long as they're the same on both sides. So I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to put this here so I don't get confused. Okay, so the three are close together, and the middle one is the one I'm looking at. So then I'll pan this over here to the right. And that's it. So that's how I set up the window to begin with, and that's how I change the window later if it needs to be changed. And those are really the two main issues that I've run up against using power windows for 360-degree spherical video. Thanks for watching. Bye.